Hello and welcome to FinTech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today on the show, I have Dr. Charles Chaffin, a well-known professor and thought leader in the area of risk tolerance. And I brought him on the show specifically to talk about his new software platform, the Money Risk Inventory. And with that, here's my interview with Dr. Chaffin. Dr. Chaffin, thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Chaffin of Money Risk Inventory, tell us about Money Risk Inventory.
Yeah, so we developed MRI based upon years of research in the space of not only looking at client comfort with risk, but also looking at client financial psychology and being able to uncover the risk tolerance, but also all the biases, behaviors, and perceptions that a client can have and develop a tool that can be assist advisors in better understanding and working with their clients.
Excellent. So, normally talk about the origin of these things. And now this origin is a long weathered academic road with other trials and tribulations. Tell us about how Money Risk Inventory came to be.
Yeah, so we started, Dr. Brad Klontz and I started the psychology of financial planning programs about 2.5, 3 years ago. And so that program is designed to help advisors better understand all these biases that clients have, understand financial anxiety and FOMO and all those different things. And we released that to firms as well as universities. It's at 100 universities now, and came back with this notion of how are you going to assess for that? How can you help us instead of using the bias or the judgment of the advisor? Let's develop an objective tool that will assess for some of these things. And then it was clear to us that we also wanted to win in the risk space, that there was lots of opportunity to better understand, not just a revealed preference of a client when it comes to risk, but look at it psychometrically, right? Look at it from a financial psychology perspective, where clients' comfort with risk comes from, and develop a tool that'll give a score as well as some analysis to help advisors really map the portfolio and develop a plan that the client's going to stick with.
Okay, so you cover a bunch of territory with this. It's not specifically, again, people are familiar with the concept of risk tolerance profiles and whatnot, and you've done a bunch of work in the behavior space. Talk to me about the different things you're testing for in this questionnaire, because when I first looked at it, I said, okay, there's a lot here, but it was very evident to me who's familiar with these that you weren't specifically targeting just on risk tolerance. Beyond tolerance, what exactly are the buckets that these things fall into?
We have a number of different products. And we do have the comfort with risk, which is just the risk piece of it. We have some firms that they just want a better, deeper analysis of client comfort with risk. But thinking more broadly on the financial psychology space, we get everything from is a client overconfident when it comes to understanding the market? Do they have some element of financial anxiety? Do they exhibit FOMO? Do they have a history of fraud in their family? Those different types of things. Were there money scripts? Clients developed the money script inventory that's embedded within this. And so all those different pieces, what we do is we assess for those. And then the advisor, our use case, by the way, is an advisor looks at the MRI of their client 90 seconds before the meeting. And they see red, yellows, and greens based upon the score of the client and say, okay, these are not necessarily, red's not necessarily bad, but here's an area we probably should focus on in this next meeting, that they're highly overconfident, or they have the client has some level of financial anxiety. Should probably talk about that. Where's that coming from and whatnot? And so it's a broad element of financial psychology. But within some of those, you get a lot of greens, right? So there's things that really aren't going to be a priority. So it helps the advisor know where to go and how deep to go, to whether it's on their RIA space, whether they're fee only, or they're looking at some element of a product that they're trying to move, where to go in that conversation.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about the experience. You package this up as a number of kind of sub products or sub experiences. I guess more so when you speak to firms, let's start with that experience first. When you speak to firms like my own, like the conversations we've had, how do you discuss how this can be packaged up?
So there's a number of ways of looking at it. When we talk to experienced advisors, the first thing that they'll say is, I know, for example, that my client has FOMO, that they have some element of investment FOMO. They're chasing returns for some reason, and they're coming to us all the time. And so my question back to them is, how long did it take you to know that? And in a lot of cases, even a great advisor is going to say, it took me a year, year and a half, or this many meetings to do that. And our response is, we can figure that out in 12 minutes. we're going to know that from the first meeting going in. Now, when it comes to our product line, we developed the risk only piece, and then we have the core, which has all the different components of MRI and financial psychology. And then firms came back to us and said, all right, help us with prospects. So we developed something called Genesis, which basically is a tool that prospects would take to help help the advisor and firm say, okay, where do I need to go in communication here so that this client doesn't ghost me, that we can be over a 30% rate of getting a prospect to becoming a client. That's been really popular. And then getting into other products, like for existing clients, we have something tool that's a narrowed down version that we call Essential. Basically, that could be done as part of a prudent process for a firm. Take this every year, see what changes are happening on comfort with risk. Are there life events that are causing financial anxiety or FOMO or whatever it might be and whatnot? So the line's developed based upon what we're hearing from firms, that it really is about having a deeper understanding, but a deeper understanding faster to get to the heart of where the conversation needs to go with the client.
At the end of the day, the commonality here is deeper understanding of the individual on a psychological level. I think that's safe to say.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, we're talking about different applications. You basically talked about it from a prospecting standpoint. Every prospect wants to be understood first and foremost, right? So you're helping with
Right.
that. Then you're also helping along the lines of different dimensions of, again, the risk tolerance space, understanding or helping understand, at least from a starting point, as to how much risk to expose them to when designing a portfolio, which is like a foundational piece of information that advisors have to go through to put out there. And then in addition to that, I guess what you really go beyond that I haven't seen bundled together elsewhere is more so on this entire understanding I guess the deeper psychology of what makes them who they are and where the gaps are. Is that fair to say?
I mean, it is fair to say. And I mean, think about, you sit down with a client, even a client who's had for 5 years or longer. Think about the number of different directions that you could go in that conversation with that client that you've been there. There's millions of different ways that you could start a conversation. And in a lot of cases, they may not be the best way to go, or it's not going to help make the relationship stickier. It's not going to get the client to take action. This helps say, okay, here's probably where you need to go, right? Based upon our color coding system, here's the red, here's what we're seeing right now. One of the other pieces that we haven't talked about is the number one thing that clients and I are asked to do for firms when we do workshops is, how do we get the client to take action? We want them to move forward with
Oh,
the
there.
financial
What's
plan.
stopping them problem? Yes, go on.
Well, right. Why are they ghosting us? What's going on? Why are they adopting the plan? And we assess for that, right? So is the client ready to take action within this time horizon or with a longer time horizon? And we base that upon what we call the stages of change model, right? So we could be in pre-contemplation mode where we're thinking about making a change to we're ready to take action. And by the way, as an aside to that, out of the 6 stages of the change, 4 is taking action. So 3, 2, and 1, you never probably even see the client. They're at that point where they're not even thinking they've got an issue. They don't come to you. To number 2, where they're really not ready, and you as an advisor push too hard they're going to ghost you. MRI is going to help you, for example, on this Genesis piece, say, now's the time to push or now's the time not to push. Now, all they're doing is collecting information. So to your listeners out there, think about any major life decision you've had to make and think about the time that you made that decision. And now back up a few months, weeks, whatever it is, where you were just collecting information on this, where you're like, okay, I need to look at other options here. Or is this a decision that I need to make? Maybe this isn't even my problem. And think about whether you as an individual had somebody push too hard too soon and you walked away. Car dealerships are a great example. Car sales is a great example of that. So thinking more broadly, that's one example when it comes to getting the client to take action. But when it comes to what we're trying to develop here is basically that tool for the advisor to say, okay, here's the time to move. Here's the time to structure this conversation. And here's what we shouldn't be doing right now based upon everyone's, not only their unique psychology and comfort with risk, but also their unique psychology, comfort with risk and where they are right now when they're meeting with you.
Yeah. And that's fascinating approach because frankly, like knowing one, they probably never heard of us. You're right. There's a point where I think sometimes advisors mistake the reach out as being a committed reach out versus a kind of like dipping toes in the water, not sure what's happening right? I'm familiar with the concepts of the trans-theoretical model change. I'm just not able to name them off the top of my head. But overall, I think being able to properly frame the stage that they're at as to help us frame the degree to which we nudge, like say pushing, to say nudge, and the way to which we speak to them is incredibly valuable. And I think there's also not just a, hey, they're not listening to me or they try pushing too much. Sometimes it's also not pushing hard enough, right? It's they are ready for that change. They're looking for something and they feel it in action, right? So that entire kind of mixing of energy is again not getting that kind of energy level set properly can be incredibly detrimental towards actually being an effective advisor-client relationship.
My example was what the majority is when a lot of times advisors push too hard too soon, but you're exactly right. Sometimes it's time to move right now. So my favorite example of that is going to the dentist's office, right? You go to the dentist, you get a cleaning or you have whatever done, and you're getting ready to walk out. And the receptionist says, okay, we're going to schedule the next appointment now. And they schedule it, right? If you wait and you walk out and they reach out to you with an email or call, the chances of you scheduling the next appointment go way down. So yeah, if MRI says this client is ready to take action, you need to move right now because there's a million reasons why that could change within a given period of time. And the client will ghost you or the client moves on to other things.
That is for sure. And it's the classic. It's funny with other companies I'm involved with too. The class, they're not taking my advice. And my response is always, okay, so square peg, round hole. Have you tried maybe a round peg? Like we have to modify ourselves. We have to know that, frankly, like it's not the client who is going to budge on this. They're going to budge when they're ready and good psychologically. How do we adapt to it? So you're telling us this. What kind of nudging or kind of explanation around this stage are you providing to the advisor to provide context around how they should act?
Yeah. And a lot of that, to back to your example there, a lot of cases is how you're delivering it, right? So one of the things we ask about is what is the preferred learning style of your client? Is your client visual? Do they want to see graphs and charts and simulations, or are they more auditory? In a lot of cases, most people are more visual. Are you presenting it that way? Or are they social? We hear from advisors all the time that talk about clients who they say are arguing with them. They're not arguing with them. They're social learners, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to understand this better. So they're talking through what you're saying so that they're learning it. And so understanding how your client learns, understanding how your client communicates is really, really important. So back to your question. So what we basically do is MRI does not provide advice. You provide advice as the
Yeah.
advisor, but we say, here's where to go. And here's why this might be an issue. Now we have firms that we consult with that say, okay, we want more scripts. Larger firms are saying, we at the top of the house of this firm, we want to have more control over the dialogue that's happening between our advisors and our clients. And there's a number of reasons for that. One reason might be that they're pushing more products. But another reason for that, which has probably been the biggest surprise of the couple of years that we've been in business, is firms are saying, yes, we want this because we're desperate to know the financial psychology and risk of our clients. But we also desperately need to know the financial psychology and the biases that our advisors are bringing to the relationship. So, better understanding that because we know that a biased advisor in certain ways can impact the relationship in a deep way. So we're hearing from firms saying, give us more. So we have something called MRI Plus that we've been working on that basically gets to a point where, okay, here's some examples. Here's some things that you could say based upon the specific financial psychology or comfort with risk of a client to give a little bit more direction, I would say, to the advisor relative to that specific client's MRI.
I think they'll continue to pull you into the deal flow, for lack of a better term, or the experience until such time as you're down to the point of helping them sign something.
Exactly right. And we keep that disclaimer, right? We're not providing advice, but it is so true. Every talk that I give, someone says, what should I say? Just tell me what to say. And as an aside, but I think an important aside, even in those examples, the advisor's describing the client, that description may not be accurate for lots of different reasons. So I'm not going to tell you what to say in that sense, but it is understandable to want more guidance. And I think that's the direction that we're going. We're also, AI is becoming a bigger component of the work that we're doing right now, where we can actually work with specific firms on their AI stack and take the MRI with their AI stack and put the behaviors with the financial psychology and risk So that's a direction that we're going with a lot of different firms right now. And that's the future for everybody.
I think it makes perfect sense. I'm seeing that trend elsewhere because one thing that's pretty adamantly clear is that there will be chatbots or AI agents that basically will be there to help nudge and train the advisor and anything that can be brought into context at the time that's necessary. A tool is most valuable when it's there when you need it. So
Right.
the training is one thing, but we know that training without practice disappears, like it just doesn't really exist. But reminding me in the moment can actually really move the needle.
Yeah, it's the same thing as financial literacy. I get in trouble talking about financial literacy, but financial literacy is important. It is. However, we are not, our brains are not just these inert objects that we fill up with knowledge and suddenly we know when to apply them. That's not how this works. Now, financial literacy has a place, but it really is about when to access that information. And most importantly, that ultimate relationship between an advisor and a client is a coaching relationship that we have a prefrontal cortex that overrides all of our biases and instant gratification that we want. And the value of knowledge now is gone way down. We're not most professions, we're not just the sage that people just visit. And suddenly people listen and they write something down and they take it and suddenly you get a check as a professional because now you've just filled this person with knowledge and they're going to what? Knowledge is everywhere. We can access it anywhere. Now, it may not be relevant, it may not be accurate, it may have all kinds of bias in and of itself. The real value is for an advisor and for a lot of other professions is really that coaching relationship, not telling them to buy low and sell high. They know that. It's to override when they have FOMO, when they have anxiety, when they're not ready to make a change, when maybe they need to. All those different things. That's the value and the relevance that's going to come from this profession. And it's coming from the profession now from advisors that are already doing that.
Preaching to the choir, I often make the joke that if technology information solved all our problems, I'd have a six pack, right? Because I could download a
Okay.
app on my phone, any number of apps on my phone, and lo and behold, it would be there. There's a reason
Yeah.
why personal trainers, coaches, everything else exists is because we are not algorithms. We are messy, convoluted, gelatinous, semi-gelatinous brain tissue that effectively has all its past traumas and everything else round up in it that makes us suboptimal non-human calculating machines. So you're I'm 100% with you that the final frontier of this, the final frontier of any profession is more so in not just the knowledge, not the knowledge we have, but utilizing that knowledge to help people legitimately actualize the best version of our service.
That's right. And if we're from a financial perspective, we're not wired for saving and investing. Our brains haven't been updated in thousands of years. But going back to a point you made 10 or 15 minutes ago, is that notion that value that comes for a client being heard and understood, which is one of the big components of what we do in MRI. And we live in an impatient world where instant gratification is key. And you go into these client scenarios, and we hear from firms that use MRI all the time. And they say, the first thing that I'm saying is specific to that client, that they feel heard, and it's specific to them. We got it. Because in an impatient world, if you're talking for 5 or 10 minutes about something that's irrelevant, you could lose that client. You could lose them in that meeting, or you could lose them as a client. So if you can have a tool like what we do here that helps that client feel like, okay, I'm understood. This person understands me and they know where to go to listen to me. You've got them.
Yeah. And this is in line with so many other trends in the industry. More and more, I think this industry comes to terms with the fact that most of what it does is commoditized, with the exception of the human element. And the reality is that every client wants to be understood. This is why advisors who choose niches tend to grow at faster rates over time than those who don't, because it is really easy. It's a lot easier for me to understand one type of human being's problems, whether that be defined by career stage, career themselves, whatever else it is, and be able to pick up and say, oh, yeah, no, I know what you're talking about because I've dealt with this problem 75,000 times, whatever number you want to put on that. So you literally start finishing their sentences for them and vice versa. They feel heard and understood. That
Yeah.
that's a problem standpoint. That's a technical aspect of it. But we've lacked to date, and a lot of it, and as you've espoused and help with this, is understanding the deeper traumas and thoughts that make them who they are. And that's that kind of financial history and trauma and mentality towards money and everything else, absolutely is kind of the missing piece in for so many advisors.
Think about the case you're in your doctor's office and the doctor says A or B. A, they say, I've never, whatever you have, I've never dealt with this before. And B, they say, I've dealt with this 1,000 times. It makes you feel better. It makes you feel like they understand me. They understand my scenario. They're likely going to be able to help me through. The listening element, one of my favorite studies was done back, I think it was 2011, looked at bartenders and waiters and controlling for a bunch of different variables, had two different scenarios. A set of bartenders and waiters who, when they got an order from a customer, said, great order. That's one of the best things that the house has. Good job, right? The second one just repeated the order back: steak, medium well, mashed potatoes, and whatever. The bartenders and waiters that repeated the order back had much controlling for lots of different variables, had higher tips than the ones that just complimented the order, because people want to be heard. They want to be listened to, they want to be heard. They want to know that you got it and you're going to move forward with it.
So it's funny. So what you're basically saying is that AI's got this all wrong. It needs to stop being sycophantic and telling me, great question. What it needs to do is just repeat it back to me to make sure it's understood, which ironically, if it actually did that, would probably reduce hallucinations because it would literally actually get what it's doing correct right the first time.
Yeah, it's true. Well, the ChatGPT is doing better with that. And again, I was just having this conversation with a colleague yesterday, actually, about how ChatGPT is, great idea. I was thinking, you write in ChatGPT. I was thinking about telling everybody I work with that I'm the smartest person there and we should shut the place down if I leave. ChatGPT, oh, it's a great idea. Here's how you should do it. They're doing better with that. But yes, it is true. Being honest and providing specific feedback is important rather than just complimenting people.
Fantastic. Basically, this is where you've gone thus far, and it keeps evolving. And as I said, you got to get pulled further and further into. It's funny. I can see large institutions thinking of this right and the wrong way, and it's like to a point where they're almost like they want their advisors fully scripted. Right? They almost want it. They just want to go from A to sale as fast as possible. If you can give us the script, we'll listen. When in actuality, any advisor knows that's not the way it works. It's a dynamic dance to some degree. So what you really need to do is effectively help us have better metacognition, better information coming in, and better metacognition around the entire awareness of the situation so that we can actually connect with the human being.
I think that's right. I look at it as there's a lot of different things that an advisor has to have in their working memory during a meeting with a client. There's millions of potential things related to not only the client and all the different variables that we're talking about relative to risk and financial psychology, but also all the products that they got to know about and be able to describe it in a way that's going to be specific. So that's a lot of put on what we call our mental workbench, right? Our working memory, and it can be overwhelming. Our ideal scenario and the work that we're doing with MRI, as well as our advisor education, is on the advisor education side, it is about developing a toolbox. And in that toolbox, there are 10 different ways to address a client's specific overconfidence or a client's specific FOMO or some element of their risk tolerance. And based upon each individual client, this tool or that tool or this tool might work. And then on a broader sense, MRI says, here's the issue that they have. It is overconfidence, or it is a history of fraud, or it is FOMO, or whatever it might be. And those things blend together so that the advisor's attention is focused entirely on what the client's saying. They're doing a 70-30 on talking and listening, and they're saying the right things at the right time that's specific to that client.
Yeah, fair enough. It's funny you talk about the 70-30 and all that. There's all kinds of mental models or frameworks for how we can basically do that through, I guess, like just modifying our behavior. But I will say that sometimes that sounds almost disingenuous or like it's the next version of the Rolodex of protests. Oh, someone says this, you say that. But in actuality, if you're legitimately actively listening and you're taking that information and you've taken in the information you give in advance and understand the concepts, you're just going to get better. You're just going to get better at this and better connecting to people, better understanding. And as long as you demonstrate empathy throughout those processes, you're going to modify based on that. So thank you for another tool to help them make that journey a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's exciting. We feel like that on the financial psychology space that we're the most comprehensive game in town. It has all the different things that are that go into the client advisor relationship that can impact it in a way. But we also know that firms and advisors are more and more saying we need to better understand the financial psychology of our clients, but we're not entirely there yet. So we felt like strategically a psychological approach to risk was where we knew we could be effective fast, that there were opportunities to look at it from a psychometric perspective, to really look at not look at just what the behaviors are in an individual, but how they really respond to uncertainty, their past. The best way to understand how someone's going to behave in a future is look at how they did it in the same scenario in the past, right? And look at that from a psychological perspective when it comes to risks. Having those two pieces together it's been a fun journey so far in bringing this out to firms and advisors really around the world. We're in multiple countries now, so it's been exciting.
So before we get to the last final questions, I got one more for you, which is you've gotten this far with it. Besides getting dragged down the rabbit hole, of telling people what to say, like where else do you see this going?
I think it could go a lot of different spaces. We hear from firms talking about, okay, what's client readiness relative to specific products, for example. So we have firms talking to us about how could we assess for client readiness when it comes to a fixed annuity, for example, right? And are they ready relative to the stages of change, but also looking at their elements of financial psychology? One thing I haven't talked about here is does a client feel like they have control over their finances? Some people do, some people don't. Are they the household CFO? Are they not? Better seeing those things. So we're hearing from firms looking at it from that perspective. I think more broadly, where we're going to go as a company is probably a deeper, more systematic approach to AI. So we're looking at AI as I mentioned, from a firm specific approach where we go in and look at that marriage of MRI and what they're doing on the AI space relative to whether it's a broker dealer or whether it's an insurance company or even an RIA. I think we're going to be looking at that more broadly. And I think way down the road, I think MRI is going to be able to help look at the individual and even go more broadly as we think about some of the factors that impact the client advisor relationship, whether it's health, whether it's life events, those different types of things. Still not providing advice, still not being something that's going to be prescriptive from a mental health perspective, but really just being able to help that advisor and that firm have that deeper relationship, which brings in all kinds of other different variables.
Excellent. So before we wrap up, I got three questions that I ask everybody on a positive note. The first one is if you had one wish for something to change in your company or the industry as a whole, what would it be?
I think as an industry as a whole, I think that the one thing I would like to change is to better understand the value of advisor experience. And what I mean by that is experienced advisors bring many positive attributes, some of which we've already talked about, that they've seen scenarios of clients, they've been through volatility, and they could be that coach, which really is that ideal scenario. But experience also can be a detriment. And what I mean by that, it's a detriment when we only rely upon that. When we quickly say, okay, this is exactly similar to what we had 10 years ago, or this is really financial planning. The one thing I hate, I get in trouble, but I always complain about it is that financial planning is an art. No, it's not, it's a science. Right? It's a science. There are systematic ways in which we can better understand, as all the work that we're doing, understand clients and be able to respond. An art, you need 15 years of experience, and then you just got to, okay, what happens to the clients that you had in year 7? And you have experienced advisors, I'm sure, that are listening. I'm not suggesting that experience is a bad thing. Experience is a great thing. But we are systematic ways that we can understand clients and understand ourselves, our own biases that are going to be helpful there. That the art is way smaller than the science. The science is still the big piece. So we're getting there with that. That's my one wish. That's the work that I do every day is focused on that. But I would love to see it go away a little bit sooner.
I like to say there's a science to everything, and you need to have an appreciation for that, right? Every aspect of this business and human interaction is something that can be measured, studied, understood at a deeper level. And I find those who basically say it's an art and dismiss the science of it, more often than not, it's like, okay, so what you're saying is you're typically disagreeing with what the science is saying, and you want to do what it is you want to do.
True. And it's also like and I'm not dismissing any advisor at all, but it's also, what about the 70% of the prospects that didn't convert? for you? What about them? What could you have known better about those clients that made them convert from a prospect to a paying client? There's always opportunity there to get better.
Yeah, and like the end of the day, if someone's studied this topic and proven validity through a thesis or to experiment, like all you like now we're talking about your bias, not anything else. Like it's your bias to dismiss this. That's your call, but saying it's invalid is just a hand wave that makes no sense. All right,
Yeah,
I'll
it
go on.
is.
I could say a lot more on this topic, but let's move on. The second question: what's been the hardest part in getting the company to where it is today? I'm gonna guess your entire career, right? Like just all the research.
Yeah, the hardest part for us at MRI has been I started my cognitive psychology journey and my PhD is really focused on attention. And getting anyone's attention in anything is always a challenge. So as MRI started, the biggest challenge for us was getting the attention of the advisors and the firms to say, look at what this does. Yes, we could do the risk piece better, but the financial psychology piece, here's why this is valuable. And it took us a good deal of time to really get the attention of firms to say, oh yeah, I can see the value in this. And then it snowballs. And then suddenly people say, oh my gosh, you are an overnight success. Well, no, not exactly. But that first piece, the biggest challenge for us was take the demo and you'll see why it's valuable and whatnot. But the first 6 months was just, hey, please, just handing the demo to anyone, including my mother. Just please, just take the demo, please. But now it's going really well. But for the first few months, it was a challenge.
Yeah, overnight success. Yeah, yeah, overnight success with decades of there's no such thing as an overnight success.
Yeah.
And the last statement is, what is it that keeps you getting out of bed in the morning to keep on fighting the good fight that is entrepreneurship?
I think that if we can better help an advisor be more focused on their clients and have the conversations that the valuable client conversations that advisors have with clients every day that are the most important ones that are about their goals, about the lives they want to lead, the work that they've done. Your listeners who are advisors, that people every day are entrusting their life's work and their goals and their hopes and aspirations to you and the work that you're doing. And if we can help that, which is what we're trying to do, to say, here's the spot to go that's going to make that relationship more impactful, that's incredibly valuable. And if we can help one advisor, help one family better, then we've been successful. And every day we're hoping that we're helping one more. And I think we are.
Fantastic. Dr. Chaffin, thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So that was Dr. Charles Chaffin of the Money Risk Inventory. If you're in the market for something to help you deeply understand your clients on multiple dimensions, please take a look. As always, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please review on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or as you get your podcasts. And until next time, take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at jasonpereira.ca.